When the Storks Came Home by Isabella Tree and Alexander Finkel, Finkeldey. It's a planet-friendly book and has a little note. If you bought this book, it says, hey, this book was a really good choice. Not just because it's a great book, of course we'd say that, but because it's printed on recycled paper, made from 100% post-consumer waste. Turning a tree into new paper uses a lot of energy, water, and chemicals, but turning waste paper into fresh paper again uses a lot less resources. The more planet-friendly way of making books costs more. So why did we bother? Because at Kids, we know that young readers will inherit the world we create today, and we think those children want a healthy, happy planet, as well as awesome books to read. We hope you enjoy it. So I love that. It is on recycled paper if you have it in hand. Beanie loved all animals, but most of all, she loved birds. It didn't matter what kind of bird it was. She loved turquoise kingfishers that zoomed low over the river, big black jackdaws that strutted on the ground, and sweet, long-tailed tits that built their nests out of cobwebs and moss. At the nature preserve near her house, she watched them for hours. One day, Beanie couldn't go to the preserve. She had a new baby brother. He was all tiny and scrunched up, and he cried a lot. But people seemed to like him anyway because they'd sent him a lot of flowers and cards. And on some of those cards were birds that Beanie had never seen before. They're white storks, her mom said. In the olden days, people used to tell fairy stories about white storks bringing new babies to their houses. That's not true, of course, but our village used to be famous for white storks. They used to nest in the rooftops. You should ask Andy about them. Andy was Beanie's friend, and he worked at the nature preserve. Storks are wonderful birds, he said. They're amazing flyers. They migrate all the way between Europe and Africa, and they build enormous nests, 6 feet across. But there aren't any storks here anymore, I'm afraid. Sometimes they fly over England, but they don't nest. Why not? Beanie asked. Andy looked sad as he explained. Long ago, people hunted white storks for food. We drove them away. Storks like to live in groups called colonies. If they can't find a colony of other storks, they don't feel safe to nest and hatch their chicks there. So they fly away again. Beanie was angry with the people who had hunted the amazing birds. It was their home too, she thought. It wasn't fair that they'd been driven away. Come home, white stork, she whispered. Beanie was determined to help the storks return. She just had to figure out how to do it. The very next day, she made an exciting discovery. It says Poland, Warsaw Zoo overwhelmed by numbers of injured white storks on her computer. There are storks in Poland that have been hurt and need a home, she told Andy. Why don't we bring them here? If they make a colony, then maybe other storks will come here too. Do you know? That might just work, Andy said. We'd have to build a pen for them, though, to keep them safe, and pens cost money. But it turned out that a lot of people in the village wanted to help the storks return too. Andy and Beanie did bake sales and raffles and fun runs, and before long, they had enough money to give the injured storks a new home. The day they arrived was a very special day for the village and for Beanie. They'll be right at home here, Andy said. They've got a lot of tasty insects, frogs, and fish to eat. They've got cool water to drink and nesting platforms to raise chicks. They look happy already, Beanie said. Beanie looked after the new storks with great care. She visited the pen every day to check on them. At first, they were shy, but soon they were roaming around the preserve, snapping up insects with their long beaks. Beanie was sure that wild storks flying over as they migrated would see the storks in their new home and want to join the colony. Sure enough, one day Beanie saw a wild stork flying past. Come home, white stork, she shouted as it disappeared into the distance. But it didn't hear. Maybe it hadn't spotted the colony. See it flying past? But Beanie wasn't giving up. The next morning, she noticed one of the storks with a twig in its beak trying to fly onto Andy's lodge. Beanie remembered her mom saying that storks used to nest on people's roofs. If we could get him up there, a wild bird might see him, she thought. Andy and Beanie's mom helped her build a nest on the roof. They put the stork in it, hoping with all their hearts that it would work. Beanie watched every day at the nature preserve, but she didn't see any more wild storks flying over. She started to think her stork would never find a mate. Then one day she heard a strange noise. It went rat-a-tat, tat-tat-tat, like someone tapping their knuckles on wood. It was coming from the roof. A wild stork was in the nest too. The storks were making so much noise, they were throwing back their heads and clattering their beaks together. "They're courting," Andy said when Beanie showed him. "With any luck, they'll lay eggs and we'll have chicks." Everyone in the village knew about the storks. They all excitedly watched the nest, waiting for something to happen. But days went by, then weeks, and there was no sign of any eggs at all. One day, Beanie checked the nest, and the wild stork had disappeared. "Sometimes they move on if they don't manage to raise chicks," Annie explained. "Don't worry, Beanie. There's always next year." But Beanie was so disappointed. "Come home, white stork," she whispered. Then they heard a call. It was the wild stork. She hadn't disappeared after all. She'd gone to get food, and Beanie could see why. Because there, peeping over the nest, was a tiny, wobbly little gray chick. The plan had worked after all. Do you see it? That was the first stork chick Beanie saw being hatched at the preserve, but not the last. Once again, her village became famous for white storks, who liked to nest on people's rooftops and on their chimneys. But no matter how many white storks there were, Beanie would always keep the card Andy had given her to celebrate the very first one. "Congratulations on your new arrival." The true story of the storks. Dear reader, I hope you've enjoyed reading about Beanie's mission to bring back white storks to Britain. Beanie is a made-up character, but for the story is based on a real reintroduction project called the White Stork Project, and much of it has happened here at Knepp on West Square, UK, where I live. As I write, I can hear white storks bill chattering on their nest and on my chimney. No one really knows why white storks disappeared from Britain. They appeared on the means of medieval headquarters, so maybe our ancestors simply ate them to extinction. They would certainly have been easy birds to hunt. The last time white storks nested successfully in the UK was over 600 years ago in 1416, when a pair were recorded nesting on St. Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh. The White Stork Project began in 2016, inspired by successful attempts to bring back white storks in Europe. White stork numbers have fallen everywhere over recent years, mainly because their habitat, wildflower meadows and wetlands, and the insects they eat are disappearing. But they also get killed by cars and power lines, and they are still hunted in some places in Europe and Africa. We visited France and Sweden to find out how they had brought back white storks. This is where we got the idea to build a pen in our rewilding project at Knepp to establish a colony of captive birds. Then we hoped would attract wild white storks to come and breed with them. And look at the pictures. You can read the rest on your own. The type is a little bit small. That's from Isabella, the author. All right, that was an awesome book. Thanks for listening.